What is going on, everybody? We are back. This is the W.A.D.E concept. This is my MMA Weekly show, and this is episode 3. We're finally back. I apologize for the delay. You guys know how it gets around the holiday season, though. No excuses, though. We're back, and we have a pretty packed episode today. I'm not in the regular set today. I'm in my actual live streaming set. And if you guys aren't watching the live streams for the pay-per-view reviews or the pay-per-view reaction live streams, you guys got to check me out. I'm going to be doing one this Saturday night as well. This is the set I use for that, so let me know what you guys think. But we are here not to talk about that quite yet. We are here to talk about... Kelsey's in the stream already. Let's go. We are here to talk about a multitude of things across the MMA platform this week. There was so much going on. Just way too many things to condense to one episode, but I'm going to try my best for you. So, first off, I didn't do a review of the UFC 218 event. I'll kind of sum it up a little bit for you guys. Francis Ngannou's a monster, not human in the slightest bit. I feel so terrified for Stipe Miocic, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But the left hook, if you guys didn't see it, Francis Ngannou versus Alistair Overeem in the main event of UFC 218. Two heavyweights. Francis Ngannou, the young and up-and-comer guy, not young, but young, MMA young. He's 31 years old. Alistair Overeem, the older seasoned veteran, probably the best striker that's ever lived in the heavyweight division. K1 kickboxing champion, Strikeforce champion. I mean, this guy's won belts everywhere. And even knowing that, you felt a little bit of anxiety for Alistair Overeem going into that fight because Francis Ngannou is a different monster. He's flat out, he's different. He when he hits you, it doesn't feel like when anybody else hits you. The way he moves is different. He's so fast for his size. I mean, he's a legitimate 270-pound man that cuts a little bit of weight to get to 265, which is the max limit in the UFC for heavyweights. And is just chiseled up. I mean, built like a Greek god. The guy is huge. And when he hits you, it's not, I mean, all heavyweights hit hard, but when he hits you, you flatline. Your whole body stops working. At least for, I mean, it was almost too scary to witness what happened to Alistair Overeem. He took a shot, and so basically the fight starts out. Alistair Overeem comes out and rushed Francis to try to grapple with him because he didn't want to stand there with him. No one does. But Francis, I think, was a little bit stronger than Alistair anticipated. Got out of the clinch. They stood it back up. And Francis Ngannou comes with almost a left hook / uppercut from his hip from Cameroon and throws it, and looks like Alistair Overeem's head almost comes off. Knocks him down, and the fight was over at that point. I mean, he was stiff on the ground. So it was rough to watch, but at the same time, it opened your eyes and said, okay, this guy is that was his first test, and he's actually a contender now. So when you see something like that, you start to see a guy really rise through the ranks, and then you see that full potential starting to amass itself. You're starting to see a guy that's putting it all together. Now, granted, we haven't seen him wrestle yet, at least not in a multitude, to where you can see kind of what his skills are. And we'll get to the matchup with Stipe in a second, but I just wanted to, for the review of 218, that's the co-main. Obviously, the main event, Max Holloway defends his title once, beats Jose Aldo, but defends his title for the first time. So that's 2 wins over, possibly the best 145er ever. I don't want to consider, and Max said this himself, he doesn't want to consider himself the best 145-pound champion yet because he hasn't done what what Aldo did. And I respect that. I personally think he's one of the best, if not the best, 145er to ever live. But I respect when the champion says, look, let me get my defenses in. Let me defend 9-10 times. Then we'll have that conversation. I can respect that. But a flawless display by Max Holloway. Come out very calculated, just like the first fight, but so did Aldo. But Max just, I guess, dictated the fight with his pace, with kind of how he moved with Holloway, with Aldo. Aldo wanted to kind of employ the leg kicks a little more, employ a little bit more boxing, be explosive like he is, but not in spurts to where he would gas himself out. And it really didn't matter because at the end of the day, it was a short camp. Aldo did feel and look a little tired in that second and third round, so it was a pretty clean sweep for Max Holloway, and looking forward to see what he does next. I'm sure they'll give him Frankie Edgar at some point, especially after what we'll talk about in a second, what happened with Cub Swanson. But all in all, 218 was a great card. Francis Ngannou just opens your eyes as such a monster that this guy could be the heavyweight champion. And, well, I guess we'll go ahead and announce it in a couple of weeks. In a matter of maybe a month and a half, this guy could be your next UFC heavyweight champion. And it's not really an announcement. This has been announced for almost a week now, and Stipe Miocic has been on the Joe Rogan Experience, and he's talked about this. But so going forward, we all wondered, is Francis should get that next title shot? When is he getting that next title shot? When's the fight happening? Well, it's not going to be too long from now, actually. You're looking at the UFC 220 pay-per-view. The main event, the headliners will be Stipe Miocic, your UFC heavyweight champion, and Francis Ngannou, the challenger. That'll be January 20th, 2018. That is a huge card in Boston, Massachusetts. Because not only have you landed a monster headliner, but on the undercard, I wouldn't say undercard, but on the co-main, you have Daniel Cormier, Volkan Ozdemir, which is a crazy fight. There are so many different ones. I think they just added the Kamaru Usman and Emil Meek fight because Emil Meek had some visa problems, but they're going to add that to the 220 card now. And that card is stacked. We'll talk about this later in the episode, but with the UFC, what you're seeing, a lot of it is just, especially toward the end of the year, toward this last quarter where they really want to make that buck back, you're seeing a lot. They're pumping out a lot of events just over and over every week after week after week. And we'll talk about, if I think that's a good or bad thing, but they are going to give you a lot of viewing opportunities in these next 5 to 10 weeks to see some really, really amazing fights. So moving forward from UFC 218, and I know I'm getting right into it, guys. I wanted to make sure I could, condense this as much as possible, but also give you guys kind of what happened while we were gone and what to look forward what to look forward to coming in the next few weeks. And you guys, I'll be right here, reacting, live streaming, doing all that for you. I just wanted to make sure when we got back into this that you guys didn't miss anything at all. So moving forward from that, we had the last UFC fight night. I think this was last weekend. We had the main event. We had, and this is kind of goes into that 145 title talks because the UFC had almost backed Cub Swanson into a corner here because he had one fight left on his contract, and he was fighting who some considered probably the best jiu-jitsu artist in the 145, maybe in the UFC, and Brian Ortega. And, of course, Cub being, a game fighter and a guy that wants to prove that rank and get that title shot with Max Holloway, took the fight and was, I thought, fighting well. Brian Ortega showed me not completely different, but a wider variety of knowledge in the boxing realm that I hadn't seen from Brian Ortega. Thus, part of the reason I had picked Cub Swanson, because you always think, okay, if Brian Ortega can get a hold of him, if he can get a clinch, get a takedown, even though Cub is a black belt on the ground, Brian Ortega is just such another level that it's so tough to see Cub doing anything with him. I mean, Cub got submitted by Max Holloway, who isn't the level of a Brian Ortega, so it's not comparable to say, well, Cub's a black belt, he's a black belt, that neutralizes. Well, not really. Brian Ortega is a much more superior grappler, but he also showed a good range in his boxing technique. He showed, he's the longer fighter. He showed distance with his lead hand to be able to kind of put Cub where he wanted him and not be in dangerous positions and kind of roll with punches. But Cub was also doing a good job. Cub is usually a very wild puncher, a very aggressive combo thrower that walks you down and throws big shots. And they, if they connect, you're in trouble. Cub did throw his wild shot, and when I say wild, I don't mean there's no technique behind it. Of course not. He has one of the best techniques in the 145 division. That's why he's knocking fools dead left and right, and winning, fight of the night bonuses, performance of the night bonuses. But when I say wild, I guess I just mean unorthodox in the lanes that the punches come down. He throws wide looping shots. Even his straight shots don't come straight in down the pipe. But Brian Ortega, handled the situation in a way I didn't think he would be able to. His boxing had looked very improved. Cub was landing good shots, and he was bringing the hands down with shots to the body. I think that was the game plan, was to have Brian Ortega's hands come down. Obviously, the Mike Tyson effect, bring the hands down, the head opens up. And Cub seemed to be employing that very well. But any time, and this is what was so crazy, any time there was some kind of clinch or a grappling situation on the cage or wherever, Brian Ortega looked so strong and his grip looked so tight in any position. And Cub, for what I think Cub was so scared of, I don't want to say scared, but I think he was so worried about protecting against either some kind of takedown or shots to the head or maybe a knee to the head in the clinch, but he wasn't defending his head and neck. I think he was a little worried about the takedown. I think he wanted to lean on Ortega, so he could not be taken to the ground, but he was pretty much giving up his neck in every clinch situation. And Brian Ortega, obviously being a jiu-jitsu black belt, a high level jiu-jitsu black belt, notices right away. And in the first round, at the end of the first, wraps Cub up and takes him to the ground, almost in a reverse north-south situation, with like an inverted guillotine, and it looks tight. And it's late in the round. Cub is trying to squirm, get away, and fortunately for Cub, he says he thinks he would have got out of it. I don't know. That thing looked pretty wrapped up. He gets out of the choke. The round ends, and then the second again, Cub employing more body shots, bringing the hands down, throwing some straight shots, some looping shots to the head, doing a great job. Again, Ortega taking the shots well and, establishing a range, not letting Cub get too close with those shots to really get inside that guard. And then again, a clinching situation. Brian Ortega has probably, in this submission, if you guys haven't seen it, go back and watch the UFC Fight Night. If you haven't seen it, it was one of the most amazing submissions, not in the fact that it was just a submission I'd never seen before. It was a standing guillotine. But Ortega is so quick and his grip is so tight that when he gets the overhand on the guillotine, almost in a front headlock, and then jumps and pulls guard. And for those that don't know what pulling guard is, think of, wrestling fans will get this reference. Think of Chris Jericho hitting a code breaker, where he would pull the guy on top of him to land the move. So in wrestling, obviously, a takedown is you would want to grab the guy, scoop him, and take him to the ground. Well, some jiu-jitsu practitioners will do what's called pulling guard, where they will jump onto you and latch onto you and try to bring your body weight down onto them to get you in their guard, just to get you to the ground. It's almost their way. If they can't take you down, well, they're going to try to bring you down and jump, and they call it pulling guard. Well, Ortega gets the front headlock with the hand over the top, and is almost choking with one hand. Cub's okay there. He defends with one hand, but when Ortega jumps and pulls guard with the feet wrapped around the body in the body lock, and then he actually transitions to a body triangle, Ortega has the guillotine wrapped up, and it looks tight already. But Cub's surviving. He's trying to fight the hands where he can under his neck, and he's trying not to let him really cinch that thing in and really start to squeeze, because from this fight and from others that you see from Brian Ortega, he has some kind of otherworldly squeeze in his guillotines and his rear naked chokes. There's things that the guys, you will be submitted by if you get caught deep. It looks like he can just wrap you up so quickly that it's over before you know it, right? But that's obviously it's a standing guillotine, pulls guard. It's a great submission, but what made it so amazing and what makes Brian Ortega so different is his ability to adjust mid-submission or adjust accordingly to what his opponent is doing to try to get away from a submission. Most guys will, just try to lock down that submission even harder or squeeze even harder on that submission. If a guy is squirming or he's trying to get loose, the natural reaction would be to squeeze harder so he can't get loose. Well, Brian Ortega lets go of the choke almost and readjusts himself. He still has his arm over in the front headlock, but he readjusts while he's hanging on to Cub Swanson's body. Readjusts his legs into the body triangle, gets it really tight, then rewraps his hands and puts the other hand under to cinch the lock. Immediately, Cub Swanson, you can tell, knows he's in trouble and can't take anymore, and starts tapping vigorously, almost punching with an open hand, trying to get out of this submission because it looked like the lights were going out. And obviously, Brian Ortega wins the fight. And Brian Ortega is another one of these guys, almost anti-Conor McGregor. I don't want to say anti as in he doesn't like Conor McGregor or any of that, but he's anti-Conor McGregor in the way that he carries himself outside of the cage. I guess what his goals are with fighting, what he wants to take this vehicle that fighting is, and promote to the world. And it's almost the Rose Namajunas effect, where he gets on the mic, and you expect to hear a call out. You expect to hear, "I want performance of the night bonus. Give me that fight of the night bonus." But he doesn't do any of that. Brian Ortega is a different guy. He gets on the mic and turns to Dana White and says, "Dana White, I don't really want anything, but I want one thing. I want to be able to use this vehicle, this thing I do, fighting, to help kids, to help any kind of kids out there in trouble, or to help any kind of charity work. I want to do that. That's what I want to do." And he was talking, through the TV, through us, to Dana White, pretty much. And it's just refreshing, It's refreshing to see a guy, and it's really cool to see a guy that can actually be a hero, right? I'm not saying that Conor McGregor can't be a hero, or some of these guys that, talk brash and wear the nice suits and have all the money, they can't be, your heroes, or the people you look up to. But this guy is an actual, guy to look up to. This is if I'm a father, I want my child, if he's watching this, which for sure my child hopefully is not watching, combat sports until he's, ready for that level of fighting. But if he's, watching combat sports with me, and we're showing different techniques, and I'm teaching him to defend himself, and then you see a guy like Brian Ortega, who is a true martial artist through and through, is completely humble. I mean, the guy has, I don't think, any sense of brashness in his body. Completely humble, respectful, wants to work with any and all charities that he can, wants to help kids. That's who I want my son or daughter looking up to and saying, if we're going to do this, if you're going to get into this sport, be like this guy. Even if you're not getting in this sport, just be like this guy, And it's just refreshing to see, especially from a guy that doesn't really have a big name yet, but that's growing. And this guy is a problem. Kelsey is very excited when I said the word kids. Not quite, not time yet. But, at some point, you want to see a guy like Ortega take that next step into the upper echelon of fighters. And they even asked Dana White, they said, "Hey, what's next for him? Is a title fight next?" And Dana White, of course, shrugged that off and said, "Absolutely not. That's not where we're going, not yet, because you still have Frankie Edgar." And pretty much, again, Dana White, who knows when he says stuff, what he means it, or if he doesn't. But he has said that Frankie Edgar is going to get the next title shot against Max Holloway. But we could see, a Brian Ortega maybe take on a Ricardo Lamas or somebody like that for that second. Whoever wins that Holloway Frankie Edgar fight, maybe the winner of that would take on somebody, maybe the winner of the fight of the Ricardo Lamas or Brian Ortega. But it was a great showing from the guy. I'm happy for him. He's one of these guys that you're going to start hearing about. I guarantee it. He's a finisher. He might not be. He has knockout power too. He's knocked out guys. He knocked out a guy with a knee a couple months back. He can knock guys dead. But it's just he's so good in his submissions and the setups to those submissions that it's tough for him to really, for anybody to get inside that. I don't see anybody finishing him unless they can somehow. It's almost the Damian Maia effect, where you have to, stay on the outside, Tyron Woodley, and just jab, and not let him get a hold of you, because if you do, it's over. But that was a great card. There's actually a fighter I wanted to talk about, and I want to make sure that I know he's on the card, that it's coming up. Because if he isn't, then I'm going to sound like a dummy here. So while I'm looking for that, we'll talk about what's going on with the middleweight championship. So if you guys haven't heard, obviously the last month or so, George St. Pierre had won the middleweight title from Michael Bisping. Had taken 4 years off, come back, the superhero, the triumphant return of George St. Pierre, and he wins the title. And immediately Dana White says, all right, well, he's going to defend against Robert Whittaker. No fighting in any other class. None of this other stuff. We're going to unify the belts. He's going to defend against Robert Whittaker, who is the interim middleweight champ. Well, again, we just talked about it. Dana White was absolutely wrong. And I don't know how I feel about it. I feel good in a way. I feel bad in a way. And I'll tell you why. I kind of want to discredit it. Or not discredit it. I don't want to discredit anything. I want to make sure that both sides of the story for George St. Pierre are being told, because George St. Pierre, again, is a true martial artist, and a lot of fighters really respected this move. So George St. Pierre is actually going to vacate the middleweight title. Robert Whittaker has been crowned the unanimous middleweight champion in the UFC, and George St. Pierre is going to probably take some time off. Now, there are a couple of things surrounding this that are kind of, some people believe this, some people don't, but he says he has ulcerative colitis, which I guess is from trying to put on the weight to fight at middleweight, where reports are he was throwing up backstage, couldn't hold food down, his skin was breaking out, and hives, and just all kind of different health issues that he really obviously shouldn't have had because he shouldn't have been fighting at that weight anyway. And even now, they've Ariel Helwani had George St. Pierre on his show, I think via Skype or via telephone, and was talking about how he had lost already. He's walking around at 187 just normally now because his body just literally can't handle being a 190, 200-pound man. And so, apparently that's a very painful disease. Now, some people believe that George has it. Some people think it's a get out of jail free card, so he doesn't have to defend his title against Robert Whittaker, who's a monster. I'm not going to speculate on any of that because I don't know. What I do know is it's tough to see George St. Pierre, who, I just gotten into the sport by the time he was kind of leaving. But you go back and I've done my research, and you watch him fight the Josh Koscheck's, and you watch him fight the Matt Hughes and the second Matt Serra fight, and you watch him defend his title, and you see a guy that looks like a superhero. And then when you see that guy come back after 4 years and look, I wouldn't say just as good because he didn't look just as good, but he beat Michael Bisping on that night. He was good enough. He was as good as he had to be, right? And so when you see that, it's kind of, it's disappointing to see a guy not defend that title, especially when he, defends his title 9-10 times when he's in his prime. But once he, gets to the middleweight title and says this is the fight and he's going to defend and all this, and then he doesn't. It's disappointing, but I do understand if he does have ulcerative colitis, for God's sake. That's something you can't play around with. And I'm from the other side. I completely, it's hard for a guy to say, okay, I'm just going to vacate 31 days after they win the title, because you want to hold on to that title. You want to be the champ of the world. You want to try to get better and defend. But a true martial artist that George St. Pierre is, he vacates the title he just won, as to not hold up the 185 division, which had been held up for months, like almost every other division in the UFC, because champions aren't fighting. So I respect that. I respect the fact that if you're not going to fight, and you're not going to fight, there's no point in holding up the division for 5, 6, 7 other guys that can get a shot at that title. And so, in one breath, it's very disappointing. You would love to see George fight Robert Whittaker, even though I think he'd have a lot of problems with Robert Whittaker. But on the other hand, I do respect George. Of course, how can you not? He might be pound for pound the greatest fighter to ever live. And just like, it's another example of the true martial artist that he is, that he doesn't, and I always bring Conor McGregor up, and I always bring, him into the conversation, but Conor McGregor could easily vacate that title, but he's not going to do that. They're just different personalities, different fighters. I understand that. But George St. Pierre, I do respect him for vacating the belt and letting other guys that do deserve a shot at that title get that shot. And on the heels of that, we actually have a fight. So it's almost immediately after that title was dropped, the UFC has made the middleweight title bout that kind of we all were waiting for and hoping for a long time, and this is going to be a crazy fight. Crazy fight. You got Robert Whittaker, your middleweight title holder, versus Luke Rockhold, the former middleweight champion. Looks almost flawless in every fight he has. It's effortless to him in most fights. I'm a big fan of the way he fights. He's got crazy good technique with his kickboxing, a monster grappler. The strength this guy holds, and he fights at AKA, out of AKA, the gym I think it's in San Jose. But the same gym that you're talking about Daniel Cormier fights out of, Khabib Nurmagomedov fights out of, Cain Velasquez fights out of. So he's training with these killers every single day and just honing his craft. And the guy he doesn't have a lot of weak spots. I think the only weak spot you could probably find in Luke Rockhold's game is sometimes his attitude a little bit. And it's an arrogance, but it's an almost disrespectful, I don't need to try against you arrogance. Whereas Conor McGregor, again, I'm Conor McGregor fanboy. I'm trying to compare two guys that have an arrogant attitude. So Conor McGregor's arrogant attitude won't ever underestimate someone during a fight. He might tell you that you're nothing, that this is going to be a cakewalk, but he prepares as if you are, the champion of the world or whoever it is he's fighting. Luke Rockhold, the one knock you see against the guy is, especially in the Michael Bisping fight, he didn't come into that fight taking Michael Bisping that seriously, and Michael Bisping woke him up real quick with the left hook that put him down, and all of a sudden you're not the middleweight champ anymore. And it took him a year and a half to get back to this title. So I think Luke Rockhold has kind of, I don't want to say matured, but kind of seen, look, I got to take this seriously because I don't know when I'm going to get back to this title. I'm sure that night, once he lost, he thought he was going to get his rematch, and Michael Bisping held on to that thing for 11 more months, and he didn't see the belt at all. And so, and Luke Rockhold didn't fight for that long period of time either. He just now a couple of months ago, got out of a fight with David Branch that he showed some pretty utter domination in on the ground against a Renzo Gracie black belt. So this guy is a monster grappler against, again, Robert Whittaker, the 185 champ, another great grappler, great wrestler. Throws, leaning in, jumping in strikes, very quick, very agile, almost a smaller guy for the division, so you're going to see a lot of speed from him. I would think you'd see a lot of darting in and out, managing distance. Same with Luke Rockhold. He really manages distance well with his front kicks and his body kicks. It's going to be a great fight. We'll do a prediction when we get to that point. But that's where the middleweight division is. Things are looking up. I think it's really good for the middleweight division to have a solid champion. I think, 155 should do it. And no telling when Conor comes back. But when you'll see, and give it till midway next year, you'll see these divisions churn like a well-oiled machine when they have a champion and a challenger. When they have these interim belts and they have these guys that aren't fighting as the champions, it holds the entire division up, it holds the company up, and it takes viewership away. So this is very good for the division. I'm really excited to see where this goes, and I'm really excited to see this fight. So that's what we're looking forward to in the middleweight division. While we were doing that, I was looking up a guy. I think his name is Eric Anders. That's correct. So this guy, Eric Anders, and this kind of falls into my background. Eric Anders is a former collegiate football player who has, after his college career, had done some, tried to play some in the CFL, I think, for a little bit, and even NFL Europe for a while. So Eric Anders is going to be, it just fought recently. I think it was on the UFC 123 card, 124 card. I think it was last weekend on the Fight Night Cub Swanson, Brian Ortega card. He was on the undercard and won his fight. And after his fight, calls out Lyoto Machida. These guys are 185 pounds. Eric Anders is undefeated at 10-0 and is starting to make some headlines. Big, heavy hands, great wrestling. And this guy, again, I did a little bit of research on him, played college football at Alabama, so that's kind of my world, at least, of knowledge. And it was really cool to see a guy that's, obviously not myself, but that comes from that same background, really doing his thing in MMA. And he's 29. I think he just turned 30. I cannot talk today. Whew. He just turned 30, and this is going to be his first main event. He's 10-0. He's knocking dudes out left and right. And he's dominating at the 185 division. Do I think he's ready for that upper echelon yet? I don't think so, but I don't know. You don't know, because you see guys like Cody Garbrandt go from unranked to a world champion in 1 year. You have no idea. There are killers everywhere. Just because they don't have that ranking beside them doesn't mean they're not ready. Doesn't mean they're not on that same level. Doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that every time you see someone that comes up out of nowhere, that they've just been dominating the competition for the last 3 years, and they're just now getting their shot. So I'm excited for Eric Anders. He's going to be fighting in the main event of the UFC Fight Night 125 card against Lyoto Machida, and he, again, after his fight, calls out Lyoto and says, not in a disrespectful way, but I think that my next matchup, a good matchup would be for me, Lyoto Machida. And I thought it was too. I didn't think he would get the fight just because of the clout that comes with Lyoto Machida's name. He's a big-time name, former champion. But he gets the fight, and he's going to be in the main event, so good for him. I wanted to throw that in briefly just because I saw him fight. Again, heavy hands, good grappling, strong guy, and I hope for the best for him. I'm a big Lyoto Machida fan. I think that's an interesting matchup with Lyoto's dart-in karate style versus Saunders, who is, throws heavy hands, great wrestling, great grappling. It's a matchup, matchups makes fights, styles make fights. So that's going to be a good one, I think. That's I think next weekend, UFC Fight Night 125. Let's check that out. Next weekend or the weekend after? Weekend after, sorry. Because next weekend is UFC 219. And speaking of UFC 219, segues for days here at the W.A.D.E Concept. We're running through them, guys. UFC 219. I don't think they found a perennial main event. But I think as of right now, they're just going to go with what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the women's featherweight title, Holly Holm versus Chris Cyborg. Now, we got into this a couple weeks ago. We got into this about the matchup and why Holly's style is kind of what the opposite of what Chris Cyborg likes to fight. Why Holly's style will keep her in this fight. And we'll talk about it a little more now just because, it's coming up. But Chris Cyborg, if you guys don't know, 18-1, a killer pretty much in the MMA, regardless of where she fights. She fought in Strikeforce. I think she fought over in Invicta for a little bit. She's fought in different organizations and just ran through everybody. The whole, when Ronda Rousey was, on top of the world, bantamweight champion of the world, tapping girls out, knocking girls out left and right, the baddest woman on the planet. This girl, Chris Cyborg, was waiting in the wings for that fight, and it never happened. It was going to be the biggest fight in women's MMA history, and it never happened. Partly because Chris Cyborg couldn't get to the UFC, partly because I don't think Ronda wanted any part of that fight, because it's just a different level. People thought that Ronda was a boxer at some point in her career. Obviously, it wasn't the case. She got tuned up by Holly Holm, and Holly Holm showed a lot of weaknesses in the style of a Ronda Rousey, who is not, I wouldn't say congruent to the style of Chris Cyborg, but both move forward at a very aggressive pace, right? So both are going to come at you, they're going to walk you down. Chris Cyborg is going to walk you down to punch you and knock your teeth down your throat. Ronda Rousey, her coach was telling her she could do that, but what her main goal was, if that wasn't working out, or if she wasn't the women's Mike Tyson or whatever that people called her back then, her main strength was to go back to those judo throws and grab a hold of you, toss you on your head, flip you over, arm bar, fight over, right? So both move forward in a very aggressive manner. Holly Holm, for people that don't know, is probably one of the best, known for her boxing, known for her strict boxing background and kickboxing. People forget sometimes that she's an actually phenomenal kickboxer as well. Probably one of the best strikers in women's MMA, right beside, I guess now, Rose, but Joanna Jędrzejczyk and this Chris Cyborg, but Holly Holm's striking is different. She can strike almost in that dead space of moving backward and moving forward. She's going to time you. She's a counter striker. So when this is almost conducive to her style, that Chris is going to just walk forward, and Chris Cyborg has said this in interviews this week even, she's going to walk forward and chase Holly around, because the whole thing is Holly's going to run from her. Holly's not going to run. Holly's going to fight smart and not get in there and throw hands, right in the middle of the cage with one of the deadliest women on the planet. Chris Cyborg is going to walk forward on her for the entire 5 rounds in her statement, and that's just playing right into Holly Holm's game. I don't think this is a fight that Chris Cyborg this isn't going to be a cakewalk at all, because Holly Holm is a tough customer, and beating Ronda Rousey and Chris Cyborg, having those 2 fights on your resume, make you, in effect, and I know this is a hot take, but that makes you, in effect, the best women's fighter ever. I don't think she lost the Jermaine Durand to me fight. I don't think she lost that fight. I don't know how that was judged or why that was judged the way it was. She would only have 2 losses. Granted, Misha beat her at the end of the fight, which, that's why you fight an entire fight, right? That's why you fight the last 5 seconds of the fight. If you don't fight it, Holly wins that fight, but she gets choked out and loses the fight. Loses her title. It happens. But other than that, Holly has been, if she pulls off the Ronda Rousey victory, which was at the time and still to this day the most shocking upset in UFC history, men or women, and then she comes out and meets this machine, Chris Cyborg, who is just walking through girls left and right to her on her way to the title. They made this division for Chris. This is supposed to be her kind of coming out party. This is Chris Cyborg, the deadliest woman on earth. crazy fast hand speed, good jiu-jitsu. And I mean, she's a black belt on the ground, but she wants to stand, and she said she's going to walk forward and chase Holly down and knock her out. Do not sleep on Holly Holm, folks. I'm telling you, and I know, again, this might sound like just me not knowing what I'm talking about and being new to the sport, but I've watched Holly Holm fight, and I've watched her counter strike, and I've watched her eat people alive that walk her down and try to just throw hands and stand there and bang. Right? I've seen her eat girls alive doing that. And if you do that and you leave yourself open, that question mark kick is there. That head kick that she knocked Ronda Rousey out with is there. The counter left hand is there. I mean, she's precise with her shots too. These aren't wasted movements. I'm not saying that Chris Cyborg's not precise. When she throws to kill, and they land most of the time. But Holly Holm is a different level of striker than Chris Cyborg has ever seen, and vice versa. Holly Holm's probably never seen someone as talented and as big and strong and fast as Chris Cyborg is. So this is a very interesting fight. Again, styles make matchups. Matchups like this one are one for the books, and we'll do my predictions on that when we get there for MMA Weekly, probably episode 4 or 5. But until then, it's going to be interesting to see the lead up to this, what a lot of people are going with, because that's going to be a great main event. Then in your co-main, an interesting fight, we finally get to see Khabib Nurmagomedov again, because this guy is, I mean, you guys I'm sure know who he is by now, but if you don't, because obviously he's not the most well-known in America, he's a superhero in Russia. This guy's 24-0. He's probably the best fighter in MMA, regardless of company, without a title. He just starches guys. His wrestling, how strong he is. He has a background in Sambo wrestling. He is so strong. He gets you to the ground. There's no resistance on your part because you're going to do what he's making you do by putting you on the ground. He's so strong. His grip is so tight. His grappling technique is so flawless. And when he gets you to the ground, he's going to punch your face in until you either tap or you go to sleep. But I have seen him try, recently to improve his stand-up more and more. It's not that he had, by no means does he have terrible stand-up, but the guy he is fighting in Edson Barboza has amazing stand-up abilities. And if there's any indication from his last fight, from Khabib Nurmagomedov's last fight where he fought Michael Johnson, and Johnson clipped him. A lot of people thought that he got wobbled and hurt and he was going to get knocked out by Johnson. He clipped him with a right hand, and Khabib ate it. You could tell it stung him, but it wasn't anything serious. But it showed that Khabib could be hit and that his stand-up wasn't the best. And not that Michael Johnson is the best stand-up practitioner, but he's a great stand-up fighter. Edson Barboza is an even better stand-up fighter. His leg kicks are ferocious. He kicks to the inside and the outside of that calf, that shin. That lead leg's gone in about a round and a half. Not only that, but when he does, then he sets up his high kicks, and then he sets up his body kicks, and then here comes the 1-2 in the face, and then the body jab, and then the body hook. The guy has amazing, amazing stand-up. And not to forget, he is very proficient on the ground as well. I do not think that he would survive on the ground. I think he should keep this fight standing as long as he can, because Khabib, it doesn't matter what belt you are, it doesn't matter how much jiu-jitsu you know, this fool is going to get you down to the ground, try to break your arm in half, or punch you until you go to sleep. Bottom line. But this is going to be a really good fight. I think both of these guys are right at that. Edson Barboza gets, right to the party, almost Ricardo Lamas-like, Dustin Poirier-like, which Dustin Poirier is having to come back in his career, so I hope he gets a shot at that 155 title, because I like the way he fights, and he's fighting top tier guys and beating them. But Edson Barboza, just like those guys, gets to that top tier, and he knocks out everybody not named Conor McGregor, not champion, basically, not Eddie Alvarez, Conor McGregor, those top tier guys, Tony Ferguson. And the same thing with Ricardo Lamas and Dustin Poirier. But if he can find a way to shut down this freaking Russian machine, Khabib Nurmagomedov, if he can find a way to get past that fight, then I like his chances. He's been a sleeper in that division for a long time, and I like his chances at whoever decides they're going to defend the 155-pound belt right now. But that's an amazing fight. I cannot wait for that. 219 in general is a great card. You have the return of Carlos Condit, who again I am not very familiar with. I think he was very very popular before I started watching the UFC and MMA in general. But I will be doing my research. And then you have Neil Magny, who just coming off the loss to Rafael dos Anjos, looking to get back on track in the 170 division. I think, yes, in the 170 division. And again, you know me with these segueing right off the RDA win versus Neil Magny. We're going to talk about what's coming up this Saturday at, I think, 5 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Eastern. We have where's it at? There it is. The UFC Fight Night, Saturday, December 16th. Main event being Robbie Lawler versus Rafael dos Anjos, the number 2 ranked 170er versus the number 4 ranked 170er. For what everybody would assume would be a shot at Tyron Woodley's title. Tyron Woodley has just announced that he's going to go through and have his shoulder surgery for his torn labrum. That would probably keep him off the shelf. I've had torn labrums before. That would probably keep him off the shelf. I mean, he's a superior athlete, so I'm saying maybe 3, 4, 5 months. And then obviously your 6-week training camp, so probably 6 months before he fights again. So these guys are fighting obviously for the right to challenge him for that title. And you have 2 guys that are seasoned veterans. Guys like Robbie Lawler has been around, it feels like, forever. Again, I'm not an MMA fan historian by any means, but anytime you go back and watch, knockouts from the early UFC days, from mid-2000s UFC to now, Robbie Lawler's in there in every era of MMA, right? Maybe not the entire inception of the UFC, but since it has become, a Zuffa brand and you see these guys evolving in the sport, Robbie Lawler's always been there. And he's still around, and he's winning fights. And I saw a stat the other day. I can't remember where I saw it. It was on Twitter. I want to source it and shout the guy out. But I think Ariel Hawani retweeted it, that Robbie Lawler, in any of his fights in any organization other than one of his startup organizations where he started fighting in organizations like Strikeforce, Pride, the UFC, not Bellator, any of the independent promotions he's fought for, he has never attempted a submission. This fool does not care about an arm bar, about taking you to the ground and trying to submit you with a rear naked choke. He wants to punch your face off and make you quit. He comes in to achieve violence. That's all. There's no getting out of it by tapping. He wants to hurt you. And, as vicious as that sounds, that's exactly what it is. Not that Robbie Lawler's a bad guy or anything, but when that cage closes, you don't have to be, you're not a nice guy anymore. You're fighting another individual. Not, take emotions out of it. He just is going in there to punch your face off. You know what I mean? So that was a crazy stat to me, that he had not attempted a submission in any event in the promotions he'd fought for, other than I think he had one attempt or one submission in an organization where he was starting his career. But in the last 11 or 12 years, Robbie Lawler, no submission attempts, which is nuts to me. His average, 0.00. Never attempted one. Now, Rafael dos Anjos, on the other hand, trying to revitalize that championship form that he showed at 155. He's been fighting really well. I mean, walked through Neil Magny. Completely outclassed Neil Magny at his debut 170. So, you see a guy like RDA revitalizing. Colby Covington, number 3 guy, has a case to be in this fight. I completely think that whoever gets this fight, whoever wins this fight will get the title shot. But Colby Covington's almost left out of that. RDA coming into the division, again, another veteran, great stand-up, great boxing. And I think he looks a lot better at this weight. I think the 155 weight cut was destroying him and leaving him drained for fights, completely drained for fights. So I think he's another one of these guys that's bumped up a division, has looked significantly better, i.e. Donald Cerrone before Darren Till, who we mention on every live stream somehow. I'm telling you, when they set this guy's next fight up, and again, another segue, I'll get right into it, but when they set his next fight up, it's going to be a doozy. But like him, like Cerrone, like Kelvin Gastelum, You see guys like that really stop cutting all that weight and get into a more sustainable, a more natural weight for them. They fight a lot better. I'm not going to go into what I think about the weight classes. I think we've done that before, but it's just it add more. Stop making guys kill themselves. Literally, it happens, and fighting would be better. I think guys would be more replenished. I don't think that guys would be so drained, and their health, the health benefits. I mean, you're talking about a combat sport, so any health benefit you can find that are going to last these guys and going to keep them sane and alive and healthy after their fight careers, I think we should be taking advantage of that. But anyway, segueing from the Darren Till talk to the co-main event on this card. Obviously, Darren Till and Mike Perry had gone back and forth at the UFC Dance card where Darren Till walked through Donald Cerrone. Well, Mike Perry will be fighting in the co-main event of the UFC Fight Night card this Saturday against, and I apologize if I butcher this name, Santiago Ponzinibbio. Santiago Ponzinibbio. Santiago's obviously someone I'm not too familiar with. But he's a ranked guy, and Mike Perry has been on that trajectory to finally fight a ranked guy. And again, I don't put too much worth in these numbers beside names unless you're the number one, number two guy. But it does mean something when you get a guy that is in that upper echelon of top 10, top 5, and you haven't fought at that level yet, or you haven't at least fought at that number level, that ranked level. And Mike Perry's getting that opportunity today. And Mike Perry, I live in Orlando. Mike Perry's a local Orlando guy. I think he lives somewhere in Almonte Springs or Winter Park, I think. And that's 45 minutes from where I live, like 20 miles. And so I really want to see him do well. I like the way he fights. He hits so hard. If you watch him versus Jake Ellenberger and watch him throw the right elbow that knocks out Jake Ellenberger in the clinch, it'll give you nightmares. But it's exciting to see. Mike Perry is obviously on that trajectory to get into the top 10. Again, I don't know much about Santiago Ponzinibbio. I am killing that name. I feel proud of myself for that. But I think this will be a good fight. Mike Perry seems to end fights in that first to second round. Obviously, he's going to go for that knockout. I watched him in press conferences today. Mike Perry looks juiced. Ponzinibbio looks very relaxed, very calm. Ponzinibbio. Got to pronounce the B's. But he looks very calm, ready to go. I don't know much about him, but I want to see him fight. He's 25-3. He's the number 10 guy in the 170 division. I'm guessing that's, obviously that's not for no reason. This guy's a killer, just like any other fighter in the UFC. But we'll see what Mike Perry can bring to the table. If he does win this fight, then you'll start to see a guy like Darren Till. They've been talking. They want that fight. Both guys do, and I think that would be an amazing fight. I do think Darren Till would end up winning that fight because a lot of guys play the game that Mike Perry plays. They still want to stand there and throw hands and see who's the toughest guy, who's going to hit the hardest. Well, Darren Till's going to use that movement. He's going to use that range, get out of Mike Perry's elbow range, get out of the range of the jab, the right hand, get out of all that range. And then he's going to stick with a counter 1-2 and throw a kick to the body, and Mike Perry might be in a little trouble. I'm a big fan of Mike Perry's. I want him to do well. I want him to fight Darren Till. I want to see the winner of that fight get up in that division. I want to see both guys really get up in that division because the UFC needs young talent, and these guys are very young. I think Mike Perry's 25. I think Darren Till's 24. The UFC needs guys like this at the top, and you're seeing a lot of it. And I talked about this a little bit last week, and that's kind of where we're going to transition to a couple different things that don't necessarily have to do with the actual cards. I want to talk about a couple things, and then we'll get you guys out of here. But I wanted to talk to you guys about a couple things. First off, I've always, in any sport, I've always sided of course I'm familiar with you, Kelsey. Sorry. I've always sided with veterans in most of the sports that I watch, right? I've always sided with, if Tom Brady's playing a Super Bowl, you're going to pick Tom Brady. You don't pick against Tom Brady, right? You don't pick against, if Tom Hanks is in a movie, you watch the movie that Tom Hanks is in because he's trustworthy. You rely on him to put in a good performance, and he's rewarded that reliability with good performances, right? So you trust that. And what you're seeing in the UFC, um, oh, it's because I said Santiago. And what you're seeing in the UFC now is the older generation, the guys that I pick, that I give them the nod of, okay, veteran status, you've been in this game longer, you've got to have more experience, you've got to have more knowledge on this sport than anybody else that's coming up, especially these new guys. You're starting to see a change in the guard. You're starting to see veterans get weeded out of the sport by these younger killers. And I think it's a couple of reasons. One, I think because veterans, the sport will always be growing, but the sport is growing at such a rapid pace that the veterans that came in when the sport was still so young in its infancy were learning as they went. They were learning new techniques that they were developing and learning as they went that weren't developed before they got there. They were developing them while they were learning them, if that makes sense. They would develop things, and through that, they would learn other things. I think once the wheel is invented, now some people will circumvent that and reinvent the wheel and have their own style that no one really can copy. But you see it now with the karate style that Lyoto Machida kind of popularized, and Conor McGregor uses, and Henry Cejudo uses. You're seeing younger guys take what these older, I don't want to say older, but these veteran fighters, brought into the game, and they're learning it at a much more rapid pace and evolving into what fighting is going to become, which is the highest level athletes learning things so quickly that they're developing even more new styles. And, the game will cycle over and over and over. But through this cycle, you're seeing younger guys just, I don't want to say destroy, but start to take out and pick off the veterans in this game, like the Jose Aldos, like the Alistair Overeems. I think you're going to see it with, Robbie Lawler, RDA, if they fight a Colby Covington or they fight a Tyron Woodley, you're going to see it more and more and more. And even Conor McGregor, Eddie Alvarez, you've seen guys pick off left and right, even if they don't have that veteran experience, because the talent levels are so much higher and the learning is happening at such a more rapid pace that the game is going to start. You're going to start, and it's what the UFC needs. Whether they're doing it on purpose or not, I think the booking has gotten a lot better, especially toward the last half of the year with the fights that we want to see. Holding up divisions, not holding up divisions is something that's actually helping. Believe it or not, UFC, when you don't hold up divisions, you get more good fights, and you get younger fighters shots at titles, and then they make a name, and then your company grows. Shocking. But I think that those things over time are you're seeing that change in the guard that you always see, the passing of the torch. But this is almost the first time that you're seeing it in UFC, because in MMA in general, because the sport is so young. You're not seeing a Tom Brady or a Peyton Manning retire, and there's the change of the guard, or the Joe Montana's or the Jerry Rice is retiring, and there's the next class and the next class. This is almost the second or third class that's really coming up. In that first class, those first fighters are just now. Even BJ Penn was still fighting last year, or this year, excuse me. So you're seeing kind of that first wave really die down, and up come these young guys. Again, that don't possess nearly the same experience levels, but are rapidly evolving and rapidly changing their game and their styles to, I guess, emulate those guys that developed the style to begin with, and then adding their own to it. And so I think the game is changing for the better. I think the future looks bright for the UFC. Obviously, fighter pay, sponsorship stuff, weight classes, things that are still issues in the UFC that need to be solved. And I hope, obviously a fighter union would help that, and I hope in some form that happens, because you don't want to see these fighters go out and put their lives on the line, especially as the athletes get better and as the striking gets more significant and precise, where the consequences become, or the room for error becomes very, 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 it's already small, but when it becomes almost minute, and you see guys fighting for $16,000 and trying to live off of it, it's tough. So you want things that can still happen that still need to improve, but the fight game does look up as you see young talent develop and grow and start to take over and take the spot of the older talent that developed the game and brought it to where it's at. So that's a good thing. I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the future of the UFC in that respect. And in the other respect, I am just full of transitions today. Not even trying to, it's just flowing. I don't know what's going on. But in the other hand, or the other respect, there's something that is almost working as a detriment to the UFC right now. And I want to talk about it just a little bit. because I don't. It's almost a subject that's I'm sure been brought up, but it's almost inevitable because I'm a big fan of pro wrestling. I'm a big fan of college football. I'm a big fan of the NFL. I'm a big fan of NBA basketball and all these major sports and entertainment avenues. This happens at some point, right? And in early development, you see the NFL, used to be a 13-game season. The WWE used to run 3 or 4 major pay-per-views a year. The NBA wasn't always 82 games. You can go on and on with these. In college football, didn't used to have, your 12 regular season games, then your bowl game, then your playoff game, then your national title game. You see, basically, anybody that runs these organizations or these committee members that decide on, how long schedules are, whatever it is, the brass in all these organizations, you're starting to, not starting to, but in these big time organizations, you see more games, more Thursday night games in the NFL, more Sunday night games, more content is obviously more money, right? And so, regardless if you're paying the players more now, the NFL CBA is up in arms, and that's something, we'll have to see after the season what that does, how the players get, if what they do with the owners and if that bargaining agreement can be resolved. But what you see is players that aren't very happy playing as many games as they're playing and therefore not performing in, the highest level. And you have owners and you have, the NFL brass and Roger Goodell that are pushing for more games and 18 game seasons and playoffs and Super Bowl, and you're getting a less there's not as much quality in your product. The quantity is great, of course, who doesn't want to see football every day? But the quality is going down, and it's being usurped by just almost mediocre play because guys are just trying to get through their season. And the reason I bring that up is because I don't want to say it's a problem, but you're starting to see almost, maybe not starting to, but in my case, I'm just now picking up on the almost oversaturation of the UFC, right? And what I mean by that is the UFC is going to run, by the end of this year, I think 38 to 40 events throughout the year. 40 events, 40 cards, 40 fight cards this year they've run through 12 months. So simple division would give you, about 4.5 events each month. And that's including pay-per-views and fight nights. So of those 40, you're going to see 12 pay-per-views. So that's 1 pay-per-view per month, sometimes 2, depending on where it lands, right? And with that, you're seeing almost an oversaturation where I'm excited. There's a fight every week. I get to watch a fight. And there's guys just, going at it, giving their hearts out, trying their best. And, as a fan, I'm excited because I'm getting all this and I'm watching. But then you sit back and you think about it, and you can go through 2 avenues of thinking. One, is this hurting the fight game because it's making it less special to watch big-time fighters? Because, if you see a guy fight 2 weeks ago, like I saw Francis Ngannou fight, and he's going to fight again. The reason that this is such a big fight is because it's for the heavyweight championship. But if I see him fight over and over and over, and his quality and performance goes down, 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 down because he has no time to recover, because there's no time, almost makes the heart grow fonder, right? Space and time makes the heart grow fonder. So if you don't have those things, if you just all the time just there, the product gets diminished a little bit. And Francis Ngannou is a bad example. If you just see fights, as a fight fan, fights are special. Fights are something you don't always see. There's something that has an aura of speciality, almost an event that's unlike any other, right? And for the UFC, I think it's hurting in 2 ways. One, it's cutting down on like I said, the intrigue of the product. And 2, the oversaturation is actually hurting them making these cards. They're doing it, and I understand why. I think anybody that watches the product understands that the UFC is putting so many pay-per-views, putting so many fight nights on so that they can pay back this massive, massive debt that they owe, $4.2 billion that when they were bought out by the WME IMG agency. The IMG agency is trying to make all this money back, right? They're trying to say, oh, God, we just bought this company. We need to make this thing profitable. And it's a very short-term way of thinking, right? It's a very short-term way of solving that problem, because it's not going to solve that problem. And the long-term, in any business, obviously, you'd want to look long-term. And again, toward the end of the year, they are starting to really understand that. But you have one of the best cards of all time in 217, right? In UFC 217, 3 champions defend. 218, you have a great card with Max Holloway, Jose Aldo, Francis Ngannou, Alistair Overeem. But as a business, you want a high buy rate. You want people to buy that pay-per-view, and you want them to watch Francis Ngannou destroy Alistair Overeem with that one punch. Most people saw that on Twitter in a highlight package. Not a lot of people that saw that were the pay-per-view buyers, the casual fans, right? And that's what you want to get. You want to get those casual fans. And the the WWE's having the same problem where they put on 2 or 3 or 2 pay-per-views per month, and it's diminished their product because there's not any intrigue anymore. And not only that, in the UFC, when you fight 3 title fighters on one card, and those are supposed to be your main events, your title fights are supposed to be your main events, you're going to get one great card, one absolutely phenomenal card. But man, is it going to screw you the rest of the year? Man, is it going to screw you 2, 3, 4 months down the road when, regardless of what happened, those fights tell stories after they're made, right? Once the fight's over, there's different avenues now that you can either explore or you got to wait on. And now you're going to hold up the 135 division with TJ Dillashaw fighting Mighty Mouse. Those 3 fights leave you almost without a main event. Obviously, Cyborg Holly Holm is a great fight, but that main event is somebody you want that is going to sell that pay-per-view. Holly Holm is a huge name from the win over Ronda Rousey. Chris Cyborg is a huge name, just as the most dominant woman in the world. But those are both in the MMA community. Holly Holm is not going to sell out like a Conor McGregor or even a John Jones or George St. Pierre. Those names aren't around right now, and you're hurting your business by not letting them grow. Those names aren't organically growing because you're putting everything on one card, or you're putting everything in one card, and then it's fine if you do that. If you have 4 or 5 pay-per-views a year and you have 3 champions on each card, how much would those pay-per-views skyrocket? The buy rate would be insane. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be the Conor McGregor Floyd Mayweather numbers, but they're going to be close to 1, maybe 2 times what they're getting right now for their pay-per-view numbers. And as an estimate, I don't know if that would be factually true, but they would be higher than what they're doing. But what you're seeing is because you go that route, and short term, 217 is going to be the greatest card ever, and now you have 2 more pay-per-views the rest of the year you got to fill out. 219 doesn't have a main event. 218, for as good of fights as they were, they didn't sell anywhere close to what you would like. And you can see it on Dana White's face at the press conference. He can tell you all night that they did great, and here's the gate and whatever. But those pay-per-views didn't do that well. And that's not the fault of the fighters. That's not their fault. They're out there giving their blood, sweat, and tears, doing what they got to do to survive and try to win that title and become part of the upper echelon, the greatest fighters ever. That's their goal. It's the fault of the companies that are putting on these fights with short-term goals in mind when the business needs to last a long term. And Dana White can say what he wants. The business is doing great. It is doing great. As a company, the UFC is doing great, but they're not doing as good as they should be where they're at. And I think the WME IMG people have a hand in that. It's an entertainment business. The Fertittas aren't involved anymore. Obviously, the Fertittas are moguls. They know what they're doing. They are businessmen. Dana White's a businessman. But at the end of the day, now he has a boss. And so it's one of those tough grounds where you would like to see the product. In my opinion, the way it's tough to go, the way to fix it is this, because I'm sure they've thought about it. But I think you have to cut down the pay-per-views. I think you have to go to 6 or 8 and really make them special. If you want to put 3 champions on a card now, you can do that. And another thing it doesn't let a certain Conor McGregor or whoever hold up the division, because there's so few pay-per-views, and you need those titles fighting. You need to have your champions fight. With so many different pay-per-views now, you can have a main event that's not even a title fight on your pay-per-view. Because this is, we're trying to get a money grab. This is going to be, an interim title. Throw an interim title out there. No. Take the belts from the guys that aren't defending for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months and put them in a real, unanimous, undisputed title fight. And then again, now you have 7 weight divisions with champions that you can put on these pay-per-views and double up on some. It seems like the short-term booking, the short-term matchmaking that they're doing is going to be a detriment if it's not fixed. So we'll see. That's just my 2 things that I kind of saw when I was looking at the pay-per-view list for the rest of the year and all the pay-per-views that had happened so far. It's gotta be a quality, and you can cut down on some quantity to have really good quality in your product. And I think the rest of the ones that you take away and you say, what do you do with those fights that we had scheduled? Well, we're just going to put on less fights and make less money? No, you make those the fight nights. You make those even put some titles on fight nights. You want more people coming to your product, put some title fights on the fight nights. Put it on the Fight Pass. Make Fight Pass, explode like the WWE Network or whatever it is. Make that mean something to be on that Fight Pass. Bring people into your product by showing them the champions on a regular TV basis. Especially the guys that aren't in demand like a Conor McGregor yet. Give them a little bit more clout. Then when that pay-per-view comes, they're like, you know what? So-and-so knocked full dead in 5 seconds. I got to go watch him fight on pay-per-view. Oh, it's $60, whatever. Find a way to make your champions mean more, to make your fighters mean more to the public and to your brand, to treat them like that. The money will come. Long term, the money will come. That's my beef. That's my rant. And I think that is my time. I thank you guys so much for being with me today. If you guys don't know, I'm trying to find it. If that's pointing to it, let me know. Maybe it's on this side. Yeah, I'm at Patreon at Wade Plemons, patreon.com/Wade Plemons. If you guys want to support the show, let me know. I won't ever ask you to go and donate your hard-earned money. I thank you guys for even watching at all. I do appreciate it. I know this is a small channel. I know I didn't have a lot of following yet. But we'll get there, and I thank you guys for watching. But if you do want to contribute and you want to help the show out, by all means, that's the place to do it. In other ways, if you don't want to contribute, monetarily, you can always just leave a like on the video and subscribe. Leave me a comment. If I'm doing something wrong, if you guys can't stand the content, whatever it is, let me know. I am open to constructive criticism, and we'll do what we can to make the show better. And if you guys are watching on YouTube, like I said, leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe. If you're not watching, if you're listening on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, wherever you're listening, go ahead and if you like what's going on, man, subscribe. We got more coming every week. And let me know what you guys would like to see. I want to take this show and I want to make it more. I want to have more episodes. I want to have more stuff going on the channel. But we just got to have the support to do it, and I have no problem doing it. If you guys want a non-MMA show, if you want a video game live stream, if you guys want UFC 3 live streams on the channel, gameplay, trailer, whatever it is, let me know. I have the equipment to do it. I'm just waiting on the support for you guys. So thank you guys for the support, and we'll see you next time. This is the Wade Concept, where we are debating and this Saturday watching UFC Fight Night. Robbie Lawler, RDA, come check it out with me. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you next time.